Chapter 14. Demon-possessed in church. One Sunday I decided to go back to Grace and Mercy Church on 170th Street and Jerome Avenue. I went back because in my heart I knew on the night I went to the old lady's house and prayed with her. My yes was not to commit myself to the Lord, but for Him to protect me from the demons I knew would hound me like bounty hunters. I walked past the spacious lobby and into the gymnasium where the services were held. There must have been about 200 people attending church that day. As the service began, I heard a voice speak into my ear. "What are you doing here?" I turned to see who it was. But all I saw were those who stood around me, people clapping their hands and stomping their feet to the rhythm of guitars and harmonic voices being lifted up to God in worship. I dismissed it and fell in line with what the others were doing. But the enjoyment didn't last for long. Several minutes later, that same voice spoke stronger. "What are you doing here?" It repeated. A chill swept through my bones as if ice water flowed in my veins. They were coming for me. Hordes of them in the house of God. Something came over me with an all too familiar feeling. It reached inside and took ground. This was followed by another and another, until I realized with horror that I was being raided by demon spirits, a house invasion of the worst kind for the possession of my soul. I started to feel physically sick and dropped to my seat hoping no one would notice the transformation taking place. I tried fighting back. But all I kept hearing was that voice, "You don't belong here. You belong to us." That's when the pastor took the microphone and stopped the worship. He addressed the congregation. "Beloved, I was just led by the Holy Spirit right now to make an emergency altar call for those that need it. So please come up to the front, the altar is open." As I glanced around the sanctuary, I saw many people leave their seats and go up to the altar to be prayed for. I got the sudden urge to run to the altar, to flee from the things pursuing me. But I knew in my mind I was just going up there to shake off the demons, not to receive prayer at all. I walked to the front and stood alongside the others. The pastor came down the line, praying for people one at a time. I was next to last in the long line of believers, hoping now that by the time it was my turn to be prayed for the demons would have fled and I could go happily back to my seat without incident. But the shorter the line got, and the closer the pastor approached, the more his face came into detail: brown eyes, thick mustache, graying temples. Now my legs strangely locked and I was unable to step away. I stood before the pastor, shaking from the warring demons within. For the first time in 25 years I had no control over the inner hosts. They were controlling me. The pastor leaned into me and whispered, "John, do you want prayer?" I looked him in the eye and glared at him. "No, go to hell." He gave me an astonished look, and I said, "I came here for you." In that moment he knew it was no longer I who was confronting him, but the devil himself. An anger I had never known stirred from deep within like the rumblings of an active volcano, and before I knew it I was spewing profanity out of my mouth in a voice not my own. I was demon-possessed. "Don't you dare touch him, Mother Dot." Suddenly my hands felt like welded steel. I reached for the pastor's throat. It only took a moment for the vice-like grip coupled with the tremendous strength flowing through my body to lift him off the floor, legs kicking, eyes bulging, open mouth gasping for precious air. A pair of hands grabbed me from behind, trying to pull me away, and the war between good and evil broke out at the altar. Killing him would be a pleasure. I had never been this demon-possessed before, and it thrilled me. 12 to 15 men ran from their seats, trying to rescue the pastor. As I felt hands from all over tackling me, the men flew around like rag dolls, being tossed and thrown around the sanctuary. To my dismay, I felt the urge to run out of the building. I got as far as the door, looking to fly through the streets in the condition I was in. But something greater than me, greater than the demons, wouldn't allow it. Back to the altar I returned for the kill. And as I did, a large group of men ran up behind me again and tried to grapple me to the floor. Joe, run this way. Robert, Steve, come to the front now. We need help. I felt myself reeling when someone climbed on my back. Then the weight of another person, and yet another, created a heap of bodies. I gained control of my balance, moving the huddle of men clamped around me from one side of the altar to the other with Herculean strength. Reversing my steps, I toppled someone to the floor, and a few more fell when I wrestled out of the grips that held my arms. Someone flew off my back like a rodeo rider on a wild stallion, and I flipped another person over when he grabbed at my neck. The power was exhilarating. With the pastor in the clear, I lunged for him again. But this time something or someone came between us, a power greater than the one within me. Again I was tackled by the men, only to rise with ease, sweeping men 3 times my weight off me with effortless moves. The mob of strong-armed men rolled back like weaklings, and someone else approached. Ray, the ex-witchcraft member from the very clan I was in. He didn't grab me or even try to touch me. He hugged me and said, John, just say these words, Jesus is Lord. Just repeat these words. John. Jesus is Lord. Repeat them after me. I tried to speak, but my lips had clamped shut as if someone had sewn them closed with needle and thread. Tossing people off me, the struggle spun me toward an amazing sight, the congregation, a wall of people, saints of God, locked in loud intercessory prayer for me and warfare prayer against a host of demons. Every outstretched hand in the place caused me to weaken. The struggle at the altar ended when the words came out of my mouth, Jesus is Lord. Something flew out of me, and I felt deflated. The men still held me, but not in a grappling hold like before. The force to subdue was over, and what remained were the voices of the men and women of the congregation, some weeping, some rejoicing, others speaking in a language I could not understand. Drenched in sweat from the physical struggle, I was followed to the men's room by Ray, an usher named Tony, and another man. With my hair tousled and clothes disheveled, they wanted to make sure I was all right. I leaned against a sink, turned on the faucet, and threw water in my face. Droplets falling from my brow to my nose to my chin. I waited for the questions I felt should have come my way from the 3 men standing beside me, but to my surprise they kept silent. What they wanted to know they would find out later. Hell returns to church. The following Sunday I attended church as usual with some embarrassment and shame for what had happened the week before. All week long I had felt the demon's anger toward me. But I had a taste of the goodness of Jesus, and for the first time the inescapable truth of the awful mess I was in came to me with a shuddering fear. During Bible class, I was glad no one mentioned anything about the fiasco at the altar. And it was this that helped me to understand the love of Jesus in others. When the service started, I went and sat in my seat, taking in the presence of God while the worship team lifted up their voices in praise. What a good day to be alive! When the music ended, we all sat and the associate pastor took the podium. But before he even said a word, I began to feel that same rage and sickness again. Something swirled behind me, around me, in me, and I ran to the altar for help. As the pastor started his message, a pair of hands reached for his throat, my hands. Instantly, every able-bodied man in the congregation flew out of their seats in one mad rush to protect their pastor, to tear me away from him. It was the same scene happening all over again. In the huddle, the associate pastor tried praying for me, but I was too busy tossing grown men about. Ushers flew off my back effortlessly. This was not what I had come to do, but the demons that had possessed me again, came for revenge a second time around. They were in full control of me. Hell came to church that day. A fear I had never known raced through my mind as I realized Satan had no intentions of letting me go. He intended to make me his forever, whether I liked it or not, whether I served him or not. At that moment I cried out to Jesus. Not with my voice. My lips were stitched shut again. But within my heart, the place where only God hears. A wall of men tried dragging me out of the sanctuary into the hallway, away from the altar. Away from those who came to church that day, but burning hot energy surged through me, and more people tumbled away. A moment later, the intercessory prayers of the people began taking effect, and I was hustled out of the gym, subdued by the wave of men determined to see my deliverance. They called this type of prayer spiritual warfare. A legion of demonic spirits seeped out of me like air gushing from a balloon, and when everything was calm again, someone got a seat for me and I slumped into the chair. The pastor approached. John, how do you feel? Is everything okay now? Don't worry, everything's going to be all right. What would I tell him? How could I explain that what I had just done was not really me? It was them, my so-called friends from the dark side, coming to lay claim on me. I waited for an onslaught of questions, but instead what I got was a surge of the love of Jesus, a wall that would keep me from doing more damage that day. I was so humiliated, so ashamed of my uncontrollable actions. What label had I earned from these people? One thing was clear. If I didn't break the contract, I could count on the bounty-hunting demons visiting me again. The question was when. To my surprise, I found myself back at church the following Sunday yet again, seeking answers to the awful ruckus I had created 2 weeks in a row. But something positive had happened in my life, otherwise I would have been attending a demonic service at the other church I belonged to. That day, at the end of another service, all the men of the church banded together and marched toward me. But it wasn't to tackle me to the floor. It was to present me with a gift. Tony, the man who had followed me to the bathroom after my first outburst, handed it to me and said, "The Lord has impressed upon our hearts to bless you with our congregational sweatshirt." A warm feeling came over me. The men of the church considered me one of them. I choked back tears and the overwhelming feeling of acceptance that came with it. The blue sweatshirt was designed with the church's logo. It had my name embroidered on the front, and on the back a Roman helmet and gladiator's sword stood out beneath the arched word warriors. They told me it was a text from the Bible, Ephesians 6:17, take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. The message was clear. If I put on the helmet and wielded the sword the way I was supposed to, I would be able to withstand the attacks of the devil and his demons. How could it be that people who didn't know me would show me this kind of love, knowing I was a devil worshipper and not one of them?